Ankh science and the history of European electronics. The earliest record of studies in electrical and magnetic phenomena by Europeans were done by priests of the Jesuit schools in the 17th century. The mysterious properties of amber, which attracts small pieces of paper when charged, and the lodestone, or magnet, were investigated. The core knowledge of these schools relied on the works of Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Aristotle, who were students at the feet of the Africans in Kemet. The electron is named after the Greek word for amber. Experimentations of the 17th century culminated in the discovery of means by which large static electrical sparks could be produced by various contraptions which reproduce the effect of rubbing one's shoes on the carpet and touching a doorknob. An accidental discovery enabled electrical charges to be stored in what is called a Leyden jar or a capacitator in 1742. This device stimulated interesting experimentation all over Europe and as far away as Japan. Electrical current could be passed from person to person in a chain, and a terrific lightning bolt could be produced by the discharge. A Leyden jar or capacitator is constructed by placing an insulating material, usually wood or glass, between two sheets of metal. This invention was known 5,000 years before in ancient Egypt. Shrines were built of wood and covered with sheets of gold, inside and out, then charged to protect sacred objects placed inside. One of the most famous of these shrines was the Ark of the Covenant, built by Moses the Egyptian to protect the tablets of the Ten Commandments and to serve as a reminder of the presence of God. Once charged, this portable shrine was potentially lethal if touched, as was evident in the Old Testament account. A priesthood specially trained to handle the shrine wore special clothing for protection and used a rod to ground or discharge the ark. When the shrine was discharged by the priest, it could be handled safely. Exodus 25:10. They shall make an ark of acacia wood. 2 cubits and a half shall be its length, a cubit and a half its height. 11. And you shall overlay it with pure gold, within and without shall you overlay it, and you shall make upon it a molding of gold round about. And you shall cast 4 rings of gold for it, and put them on its 4 feet, 2 rings on one side of it, and 2 rings on the other side of it. You shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. And you shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark, to carry the ark by them. The poles shall remain in the rings of the ark, they shall not be taken from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I shall give you. Then you shall make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length, and a cubit and a half its breadth. 18. And you shall make 2 cherubim of gold. Of hammered work shall you make them, on 2 ends of the mercy seat. Make 1 cherub on the one end, and 1 cherub on the other end. One piece with the mercy seat shall you make the cherubim on its 2 ends. The cherubim shall spread out their wings above, overshadowing the mercy seat with their wings, their face one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the face of the cherubim be. And you shall put the mercy seat on the top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I shall give you. There I will meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim, that are upon the ark of the testimony. I will speak with you of all that I will give you in the commandment for the people of Israel. The ark of the covenant. And when they came to the threshing floor of Chidon, Uzzah put his hand to steady the ark when the oxen stumbled. And the wrath of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and he smote him because he put forth his hand to the ark, and he died there before God. 1 Chronicles 13:9. When the positive and negative terminals of a charged capacitor or shrine were brought close to each other, a spark could occur if the capacitor is attached to a stable source of current. Charging and discharging occur at specific rates. The high voltage necessary to charge the shrine or ark was provided by the atmospheric potential difference between the sky and the ground. The electrical gradient above the earth is 60 to 100 volts per meter in fair weather, and increases to 6,000 to 12,000 volts per meter under a thunderstorm. Shrines were usually placed on high mountains, natural or artificial, to take advantage of this effect. Moses was no doubt an eyewitness to the ark in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The sarcophagus contained the electrified mummy of the god King Khufu as part of a high voltage circuit. With this tremendous power, the god king could still communicate his will in this world from the Ankh, the other world. So powerful was this achievement that certainty of an afterlife was firmly engraved in the psyche of Egypt, lasting thousands of years. Communication was not necessarily in words, like radio. It was a spiritual communion or revelation which was impressed upon the mind, resulting in a prophetic experience. They were communications of a highly moral nature, coming from beings who had been freed from the sinful bodily nature and viewed us as being almost like children. The pillaging and grave robbing in Egypt continued for hundreds of years by foreigners of every description. Total disregard for the African was the only rule, so much so that the mummies or corpses were ground and boiled to make potions for sale. The European trade in mummies in the 16th and 17th century took on a feverish pace because they were thought to have a medicinal value. The melanin-rich corpses of your ancestors were eaten by these savages. By the 18th century, the plundered skeletal remains of Egypt were under the control of intellectual scavengers in search of occult wisdom, by which they could feed the already mesmerized and addicted European aristocracy. Collectors were willing to spend fortunes to acquire these objects of antiquity, especially if they were rumored to possess some mysterious supernatural powers. Many of these curious objects are still kept secretly in private collections throughout the world. In 1798, Napoleon recruited 167 scientists and technicians to accompany the French fleet in the conquest of Egypt. And in 1801, Volta, the so-called discoverer of the pile battery, was given a medal and a pension by Napoleon for his contribution. The British invasion of Egypt in 1801 seemed primarily aimed at stopping the French savants from exporting any more artifacts. It was viewed as a matter of national security in those days. Volta's discovery of the principles by which the Djed produced a stable electrical current is considered to be the greatest invention of the 19th century. The Djed, pile or battery, Shin, Ohm. Symbol for water, electrical symbol, and hieroglyph N. Note the similarity between these symbols. The symbol for water, the symbol for electronics, and the hieroglyph N. Note the similarity between these symbols. The Encyclopedia of Ancient Egypt defines the djed as the Egyptian symbol of stability. The djed is a pillar with bands across the top and base. This hieroglyphic symbol is associated with the Osirian mortuary cult practice of mummification, serving as a powerful symbol in Egyptian magic and reincarnation, where it was used to symbolize the metamorphosis which the body underwent at death, the transformation of the physical being into its eternal celestial form. The djed is thought to represent the backbone of Osiris, whose sparks were as bright as the Sirius star. It is also associated with Jacob's ladder. A djed or battery is made by placing two dissimilar metals on either side of a piece of papyrus soaked in salt water or acid. Greater power can be realized by increasing the number of units. For instance, a single unit of zinc and copper can produce 0.759 volts, and the current has greater magnitude than that produced by electrostatic machines. Napoleon gave the École Polytechnique University a battery with 600 units. Passing voltage through all sorts of material, experimenters using these batteries were able to produce many chemical reactions and split molecules like water into hydrogen and oxygen. Egyptologists have long suspected the use of direct current in Egypt by the many examples of electroplated jewelry and their knowledge of other chemical processes. The Egyptian word for electroplating of silver or gold is sim. Sim means a kind of similar likeness of gold, which contains the ideographs conveying the entire process. The uas, an indicator of electric current, and nub, a gold in solution. However, rather than accept the scientific evidence, these artifacts are often attributed to accidental occurrence or some still unknown process. A good example is their promotion of iron as a Hittite technology, despite evidence of prior usage in Kemet. Chiekh Anta Diop claims iron usage originated in the ancient empire, 2700 BC, and that the steel blade of Tutankhamun's dagger could only have been produced by very deliberate means. He theorized that such a purity of iron would require the type of sophisticated processes used in modern electrolytic refinement. The ideograph for pure gold is proof that the Egyptians knew that the electrolytic process led to the purest metals. Plating was in common use during the ancient times, as evidenced by the many words for it. Yet no such words in Coptic, a Greek-Egyptian language, have survived, except in reference to alchemy from a variation of the word NHB, neb, to smelt. or work in metal, gold. Alchemy, the transmutation of base metals, lead to gold, was the most sought after secret of the medieval period. The origin of the word chemistry, it is a reference to Egypt and the philosophy held by the blacks concerning the transmutation of the body to an immortal spirit. Had Egyptology been in the hands of Africans or people without a racist agenda, more knowledge would have been gathered concerning these batteries. For instance, the origin of the lead-acid batteries in popular use today may well be ancient Egypt. Both lead and lead oxide, the elements of its construction, were widely used by 3000 BC. But what is most interesting is the word tet, battery or jed. It sounds like tet, the word for lead. With the principle of the jed fully understood, the principles of the Ankh remain the greatest challenge to European scientists. However, it would not yield its secrets for another 87 years. Early attempts to unravel its secrets were made by Henry, now credited with the discovery of self-induction. Henry reports that when a short wire is connected across a battery, no spark is perceived when the connection is formed or broken. But if a wire 30 or 40 feet long is used instead of a short wire, although no spark will be seen when the connection is made, yet when broken, a vivid spark is produced. The effect appears somewhat increased by coiling the wire into a helix, and it also seems to depend in some measure on the length and thickness of the wire. Henry had rediscovered self-induction, the method of producing electricity from a changing magnetic field. Hans Christian Ørsted, 1777 to 1851, observed in 1820 the magnetic action of an electric current, opening the study of electromagnetism. He observed the deflection of a magnetic needle during a thunderstorm. In 1842, Henry observed that the effects of sparks in one location could be detected some distance away by their magnetic effects in another location. The analogy between the rippling waves caused by a stone dropped in the center of a pool and the spark transmitting rippling waves in an ether-like medium were attributed to Henry. He also noted that the effects of a single spark could be detected thousands of feet away. Hertz, experimenting with various sizes of loop detectors, was able to detect electromagnetic waves and determine quantitatively the effect known as resonance. Using the spark from an induction coil, electromagnetic waves could be detected in a loop some distance away. In other words, a spark in one location produces a spark between the gap of a loop detector in another location. A Hertz oscillator consists of a coil and a capacitor made from two flat sheets of metal and a spark gap. One can easily see the similarity to an Ankh oscillator, which produces a high frequency because the coil is one turn or loop. As mentioned before, the English defeated the French in Egypt, taking over the scientific explorations and other antiquities excavated by the French. Among these were strange devices, numerous scientific and mathematical papyri, and most notably the Rosetta Stone. As a result of this scientific coup d'etat, Newton, the famous mathematician, provided the mathematical language to codify the theory of wave transmission and the action at a distance properties of electromagnetic waves. Budge was able to translate the so-called Book of the Dead, and Sir Oliver Lodge discovered the properties of the Ankh. Lodge was the first European to prove that lightning and sparks between the gap were high-frequency discharges. Current would rather flow through the high-resistance path across the gap than the low-resistance wire loop. He was able to show that this occurs because of the high impedance presented by the wire loop at the higher frequencies. Lodge was fascinated with the subject of psychic phenomena and communication with the dead. He spent much of his time trying to give scientific legitimacy to spiritualism. You may have noticed a set of grooves or lines in the center of some ankhs, especially the ones belonging to Tutankhamun. Well, after discoveries of Hertz, a Professor Rigi invented a very sensitive spark gap made from a sheet of glass covered with tin foil. This foil was divided into several strips by very fine razor cuts. When used in a Hertz loop detector, sparks are easily observed jumping across each gap in the foil. I would think Professor Rigi was 4,000 years late. The early telegraph and radio circuits used detectors of various constructions and material. Detectors are required because the high frequency of the oscillator is inaudible. A very sensitive detector was galena, lead sulfide crystals, some of which were found in Tutankhamun's tomb. The hieroglyphic symbol for stone in the center of the Ankh suggests the usage of crystal or even semiconductor technology. For instance, continuous wave oscillation can be produced by attaching oscillating components, capacitor and inductor, capacitor and inductor, and a battery across a galena contact. This black stone, Cam, a representative of Egyptian spirituality, is the most sensitive crystal, detecting electromagnetic waves well into the infrared frequencies known as heat. If you subscribe to the belief that the Ankh of a god had power associated with that god, then the Ankh of Ma'at would be instrumental in the realm of law and righteousness. Ma'at is the goddess of truth, indispensable in the cause of justice. Her symbol is the feather of truth, against which the heart is weighed in the judgment. Therefore, she is representative of the solar archetype Libra. The Ankh she is holding is the oracle of truth, operating on a principle known as galvanic skin response, GSR, named after the Italian experimenter Luigi Galvani, who in 1750 discovered the reflex action of frog's leg to electrical stimulus. It was widely used as part of modern polygraph tests. The conductivity of the skin varies with one's emotional state And what makes GSR so effective is how totally involuntary these skin responses are. An electrode is placed in the hand or taped to the finger of the subject, and the conductivity or resistivity of the skin is measured in response to questioning. The skin is the key to the soul, portraying subtle psychological changes. It does not lie. Changes in conductivity of the skin alters the capacitance of the Ankh, creating frequency changes as a result. By holding the Ankh in this way, the emotional and spiritual responses can be communicated as a frequency modulated transmission. A high frequency oscillator, like the Ankh, has the advantage of producing high voltages at low current, so they can be handled safely. Tesla was known to have attached a high frequency coil to himself and produced corona-like discharges from his body. Luminous effects produced by high voltage, high frequency coils are used today in Kirlian photography. Objects appear to have a glowing aura around them when subjected to high voltage. The Europeans have skillfully rewritten history in such a way as to present themselves as the sole provenance of all science, weaving a concoction so convincing that one can only conclude that they alone have brought progress to the world. This part of their racial policy is important if they are to convince the world to tolerate their murderous onslaughts and exploitation as a necessary side effect in the cause of civilization. One chord seems consistent in the propaganda of their discovery: a diversionary claim of ignorance and the naming of other Europeans on whose work they hold up as the basis or source material for their discovery. Columbus used the diversion of seeking a route to India, even though he was in possession of maps and accurate information gleaned from West African sailors who had been traveling across the Atlantic for 200 years. He claimed the Portuguese as his information source. It is the same with Volta and Galvani in the concealment of the piles' Egyptian origin. This stranglehold caused by European editorial censorship of Egyptology is preventing the spiritual reconnection with our glorious past. Without the oppressive scrutiny of the academic establishment, you are free to develop your own conclusions about the Ankh using your knowledge of electromagnetism as a guide. It is imperative for us as Africans to develop a way of teaching electronics that is both interesting and culturally relevant if we are ever to compete successfully in the new millennium. Free the people. The Ankh is essential to the liberation of African peoples throughout the world. Without the Ankh and its associated technology, we will remain dependent on the inferior technology permitted by the maintainers of the status quo. As a free energy generator, the Ankh represents the symbol of our liberation. It produces electricity indefinitely without any fuel or other energy sources, such as wind, solar, or hydropower. Ankhs of different sizes or capacities may be used to power boats, cars, or airplanes, giving them infinite range. Imagine never running out of fuel or paying another utility bill, enjoying the freedom to live in remote regions of earth and sky as UFOs that are powered by Ankhs.